recently, the Science Policy and Advocacy for STEM Scientists Certificate Program published some results of their program. They've had 3 cohorts so far, and I'm joined by two of the 4 authors of the paper, Adriana Bankston and Amy Ralston. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so before we get into it, because I love getting into the papers and discussing some of the details, Adriana, can you take us back? Tell us about the program. What is the certificate program about?
Yeah, so it started a few years ago during the pandemic. We wanted to provide some training for early career scientists interested in policy, and it was really an opportune time to do this because obviously folks were at home, they were looking for something to do online, and had a lot of applicants. So that actually held true after a pandemic too. But the impetus was to develop something that wasn't going to have any barriers in some ways. So, one thing is that the training in science policy, more people want to do it and don't know where to go, but also opportunities are limited. There are only a few certificates around the country. And also some trainings that exist are limited to US citizens, to certain geographies and so on. And so that's something that I was thinking about when we were developing this, that we wanted it to be open to everyone, regardless of citizenship or where they were from, and really keep it open-ended for trainees that wanted to take it online. And it's been very successful, as the paper shows.
And the majority of the participants were graduate students. And in fact, Amy was one of the participants and later on joined the designing team. So Amy, can you take us back when you saw the opportunity to participate in this program? What led you to apply and subsequently participate?
That's a good question. I mean, if you can see from my title, I am in physics. So originally I was very dead set on doing very pure physics research. We throw that word around, meaning galaxy evolution, Einstein type of work. You want to be left alone in a room with a pencil and a paper and solve the biggest mysteries of the universe. But in going through my physics education, you really learn the gap between the implementation of all the state-of-the-art science and research that we do have, that's being published, that's being produced, and how we apply it and actually use it to make the world better. And I noticed that gap as I got closer and closer to figuring out, okay, what do I want to do with the skill set that I've developed? In the course of a PhD, you really learn how to solve problems. And I just realized that there were some really big problems that needed solving in the implementation of, the work of our brightest minds. So science policy was a really beautiful transition for me into that world. And it's not very well known. Nobody in my department knows what I'm doing. I actually had to take, I think, 20 minutes to explain to my thesis committee what I'm actually hoping to do with my degree, because it's such an alternate path. But there are so many people working in it. And this program came at such an opportune time where, post the strike, the historic graduate student strike, I don't know if you have heard about it, where we were petitioning for better wages and all around better rights as graduate student workers. After that point, this program was introduced, and I had just started talking to our graduate program director they help you figure out what other options there are besides pure academia. And this program organically happened to be offered again, which was very lucky because 2022, there was a big, there was a big gap due to the pandemic of new programming that was being offered. And this came back, and the nature of it was so doable. It fit into my schedule very well. It was just beautiful timing, and it was everything that I wanted. And especially at my level, it was being produced for graduate students who had no background in policy, who were coming with their own expertise in their very niche, specific subject that they've spent years of their life working on. And this program was all about learning how to take that and take your knowledge and leveraging it in the real world, so to speak. And I was like, that's exactly what I want. Let's go. It spoke to a lot of people in my department too. I converted a couple people to take the program with me. Like, oh, that's what that is. I want to do that.
So you had there was some skill set that you wanted to develop, right? And you saw that the program was providing that training, right?
Yes.
I want to push you a little bit on that. Could you point out a specific skill that you were saying, I really want to be able to do X, and this program will allow me to do that? Can you point at one or two of those skills?
I think the main skill I wanted to develop was transitioning from writing for scientists to writing for policymakers and writing to the general public, not just science communication, but writing with the purpose of persuasion. And I think, and with the purpose of getting people interested in what you're talking about, because I think we take that for granted a lot in the pure sciences. Everyone's really interested already. They're in the room, they're in your discipline, they want to hear what you got to say, but learning how to convince people that what you're talking about is so important, learning how to target them and actually go from, the beautiful ideas to actually getting the policymakers to do it. That was a skill that I really wanted to hone in on. So how do I put my ideas into motion? And not only that, they offered the idea of how to do it now. None of it was, oh, you need to wait until you have an established career in government, or you need to contact somebody else and maybe you can get on their projects. No, you have the knowledge. You can go out and do it right now. We're going to tell you how. So we got a great bunch of talks from professionals working in the field now it was so practical. I think that's what's unique about this program. All of it was it was steps you could take tomorrow to go out and talk to your policymaker and get it done. And I was like, oh my God.
So Adriana, this is music to your ears, I'm guessing, as you're hearing Amy describe this. So let's get into the paper, because you did the extra step, and this is difficult to do for some of the programs, actually writing out the results, right? The participants and what they were learning, how they responded. There's a whole table 5, right, of testimonials, right? I was reading through them. Fantastic insights. Adriana, for those who might not get a chance to read this paper, can you summarize it for us? What were these key notable findings from your end?
Yeah, so when I start, talking about this, about how the reason that we wrote it is because we wanted to showcase what a program like this could do and hopefully have other institutions adopt it. We're trying to be collaborative, but also show that hopefully this is something that people can take and do at their institution. What we found, well, of course, honestly, there was a lot of data. We summarized the most important findings that we thought were relevant to what people were learning. A lot of folks, as Amy said, who were in the program had worked in policy, so we know what the most relevant things are. How to write a one-pager, how to write a memo, how to pitch your research to a policymaker, and all of those things are available and can be seen on YouTube and resources that we created. And one thing that was surprising, and again, coming back to my original point, that there's people from so many different countries who took it, because I think this is, again, speaks to the need and demand that this is filling. But at the same time, we were trying to draw the point that there needs to be more training. This is one model people can use, and we, again, made it available. And hopefully this is going to create a subset of trainings that can exist in other places too.
So Adriana, let me push you a little bit on that as well. In terms of what was different about your program, because I'm guessing you did canvass the landscape and you looked at what was available, right? There were many certificate programs. But what is different about this program that has made it successful to have the way Amy was describing it, and of course all the testimonials in the paper as well?
Yeah, I think to kind of go back to Amy's point, I think it sort of takes people where they are and teaches them how to write, and there's a lot of feedback. we really try to incorporate skill building, and you can sort of imagine what that looks like in terms of recruitment. But we had multiple versions of the pitch and the writing materials to really give them that skill set of they would learn from people who are in policy and getting that feedback that doesn't always happen. And I think, we had skill building opportunities. We had career panels, again, trying to give some of that flavor of where can you go and what kind of things can you do, and creating that networking opportunity. I guess evidenced by the outcome, and that a lot of people have used this program to transition into full-time careers in policy and became fellows. And some of them didn't know about anything about policy before, but they published papers, which led to other things. And so I think we're really building sort of the workforce, right, in the field, that this is creating future leaders in policy, right, from the program.
Yeah. So feedback, and Amy, you were nodding. Feedback seems to be a critical component, right? Whether it's writing the op-eds and so forth. In fact, I want to just quote this testimonial from someone in Table 5, and I quote, "I tweaked our public engagement assignment, incorporating the feedback I got from the class to apply and secure a 2021 AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. I also plan to use the feedback," again, the feedback, "from my op-ed to edit and submit it to a newspaper. Overall, this experience was great for my professional development. It has broadened my idea of how I can engage in policy in some form, no matter what career I pursue." Amy, what from your end, like your feedback earlier kind of summarized that too. Why was feedback so important? Like, how did that help you in your journey in the class?
The feedback was really an integral part of what made this class such a learning experience, because it's one thing to, attend a Zoom webinar and find it really gripping and moving and take your notes, but it's another thing to apply what you learned and carry an idea through. I think that's the other thing. Throughout this entire process, we stuck with one idea that we were really passionate about. So any type of policy implementation idea that you really were interested in seeing through, they took us through writing the white paper. They took us through writing a policy pitch, delivering it. And each one of those steps, we had detailed feedback from a policy professional. And I still read mine because, of course, graduate students, feedback is just, it's so important, especially learning how to integrate that feedback and make your pieces better. So we got the opportunity for that too. We turned in a first draft, we got feedback, and then we turned in a final draft. There was a competition added, so that added a lot of impetus for us more competitive people to really get our piece finalized.
For those who are listening in, how long was this? This is a course. Are we talking about a semester or?
It was over the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a doable time frame. It went by faster than I would have liked, but it fit really nicely into my studies.
Yeah, and I think that, again, the feedback sounds to be the critical element. Now, in terms of the actual skill sets gained, I was reading the paper and I was trying to figure out, okay, so how you said the students were now able to write the op-eds and so forth, but did you quantify this information, Adriana? And if you did, like, what did you see there?
Yeah, so what we quantified is the satisfaction for the course overall, and then learning the specific skill sets, right? Largely, and this is maybe somewhat surprising, but the data was very similar across the 3 years. So regardless of the pandemic, people still really liked it and took it seriously. But overwhelmingly, they found it extremely useful for even just learning about policy, whether or not they were transitioning full-time. So quantifying how useful they found it, what they did afterwards. We try to track some media engagements and folks whose memos were highlighted in the newspapers and all of that. And there's probably more, but that's something to consider. But I think it led to some real impact, and that they were seeing their ideas out there in the world. And competition was a plus, and we used that. And again, we had policy professionals review that and give them prizes. So I think it's as real as you can make it online.
Yeah. So you mentioned satisfaction. I'm curious though, in terms of was there a pre-post? Did you see like they came in with a certain skill set? This is how confident they are with X, and after the program, they are now more confident or whatever confident with Y. Did you do that? And if not, why not?
I think we didn't really know what to expect the first time and who was going to apply, because it was such a wide range of people from all over the world. And then we had to sort of tailor to what kind of things are they interested in. They were, international or federal issues or local things, right? So that's something we didn't mention. We had a local engagement module for people that were interested in that. So really try to cover a lot of aspects. I think we were mostly interested in making sure that they learned what they needed to at the end. And so post-survey was important. I'm glad we did it all 3 years. So we were able to publish this and really show that it was consistent over time.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you mentioned that. You brought up the goals, right? You were trying to do this sort of evaluation with respect to your goals, satisfaction, make sure the program is operating, because in your paper you highlight this, right, in terms of the satisfaction across different components, right? And Amy, sounded like you appreciated all the different components. I believe somebody was waking up at 3 a.m. in the mornings to show up.
I was going to mention that. It's just amazing to see that dedication. And he ended up getting his paper published in JSPG, and he was great the entire time he was there and did all the homework. That just shows you how much people need this. So
yeah. And are you following up on the trainees? I mean, you have one, Amy, right? Past participant. Amy, can you tell us from the skills from the training? I like how have your skills developed since then? Are you still tapping into what you learned?
It's interesting. I'm currently finishing up my PhD, so I'm in my 5th year trying to get this thesis done. And I think having that perspective of how differently you need to write for different audiences has really taken me beyond. I think what scientists get really comfortable with is the facts will speak for themselves or the data will speak for themselves. But you learn throughout this course, and what I've really tried to implement into my writing now with my writing articles and even just conference talks, is how do I convey the message that I want to convey in a way that's convincing and approachable without sacrificing any of the rigor. Because I think that's what separates, or at least this course taught me, that's what separates, science communication with the public from science communication from people who are trying to use your words to make a decision, and I think that understanding and that awareness that things aren't as objective as they seem, and that you really do need to be aware of the fact that everyone's human and everyone has their own agenda. So it's changed more than just in my career. It's changed how I approach a lot of things just day to day, which was a really cool side benefit. It's it's been really revolutionary in a lot of ways.
So we're capturing the post feedback here live. Adriana, are you following this with other trainees in the long term, and are there any plans to do that?
We've done a subset. I think in some ways we're looking for people that were willing to share testimonials and responses. That's something definitely to consider long term as we think about offering this again, because I think that we did a survey from one of the years to see where people were, but then these quotes and everything they shared really showed how much they learned. So we decided to use the data here. But that's definitely in the future plans to think more about how to keep track of where they are and where they went after.
I see. Now, this is a question for both of you. In what you learned from the paper, right, and from your analysis of the program, what is changing moving forward? What insight from the paper are you using to change the program moving forward? And I'll start with Amy.
I think we really found out that students loved the one-on-one interaction with the policy professionals. They really liked our panel segments. So we would have a panel of a bunch of policy professionals. And then we did something really cool this year. We did breakout rooms where you could go to the person who you had more questions for and engage with them more directly, because we had a group of around 100 people in the Zoom room. So it can be hard to get that personal connection. That's the downside of making it super accessible and online, because you kind of lose the personal factor. But we got really good feedback from that. We'd never done that before. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Adriana, but I think integrating more direct lines of communication with the people that are giving you feedback was really helpful for a lot of people. And it made us feel very, I don't know, a part of the career path. We're like, oh, okay, this is a formalized path that I'm considering and I'm on. And yep.
Adriana?
Well, from my perspective, going back to kind of some of the original points, is that it's difficult to make this feel like it's personal to you and your goals in the class, right? So I think that's something to consider in the future, is what they want to get from it when they apply. But also, we covered a lot of ground. So, thinking more through strategy in the future, that we were trying to highlight students from all over the US and other countries, and running into what we talked about, time zone differences, and folks who are international or interested in diplomacy and other things that is not part of this, 'cause it was not designed that way. But I think in the future, including some topics that focus on global policy topics that people who are not in the US might be interested in, that could be a good addition. The other thing is, I think coming to a diversity component, right? So we try to make this as accessible as possible for people who had internet and could do it from home. Again, we didn't charge people. We allowed them to watch the recordings and try to accommodate time zones and all of that. But one thing that resulted from this too is thinking more about students that have less opportunities. And that was part of the application process too, that certain universities have more training, certain parts of the country have more opportunities. So we took people on purpose that were in the middle of the country, didn't have anything. We knew that because just knowing the field and where these things exist or don't. And so we made sure that those people were included too, right? So that's something to consider in the future. I think there's parts of the country that have even fewer opportunities that they need to be, we need to share this with them and involve them in the future more intentionally.
Yeah, and evaluation, we know evaluation is a really hard thing for programs, right? What would you actually want to be able to do? Is there data that you wished you could have added in this paper? And I'll start with Adriana.
Yeah, I think to my point is having some demographic data and seeing, who is really here and hopefully who we're not reaching and we need to do more of. Yeah. And of course, the impact question of, this is a subset that we have that we're able to show, which I think, I would argue is quite impressive for an online program that's just started a few years ago, and seeing all the interest. But to your point, tracking more where people go and the direct impact of the program on their careers, that's something we'd like to do more of.
Yeah, and from your side, Amy, what do you want to see in the next paper?
That's a good question. I think as I was combing through the data, I think this is a universal experience with everybody who has done data analysis, is to your point, I would have loved to have a before and after question so you could track the change throughout the program. But I also would have liked more information on how they planned on integrating, because I think science policy, it's such a broad catch-all term. And I would have loved to know the distribution of people who were more interested in taking an analyst role or, doing something more public with like speaking engagements and diplomacy. Because when talking with people, there was so much diversity in how they wanted to engage with science policy. So I think that, I think the closest we came was the distribution of different disciplines that people were coming from. But again, that paints it with a really broad brush. So I would have liked more questions about their particular interest in it and what they were planning to do with it.
Baby steps first, of course, right?
Yeah. Dream big.
Yeah, dream big, but also you're still a student, right? And I think running these programs takes time, takes money, right? And it
Yeah.
takes commitment actually on that. So Adriana, what advice do you have for others who may be thinking about creating such programs? Should they all read your paper first, for example? But share some wisdom here for others.
Yes, read the paper. Well, what I would say is, we create a number of tools that you can use. So, the YouTube channel is a resource if you're just curious about policy, you want to see what kind of things you can do. We created toolkits and simulations where you can do shorter versions. If you want to test this out, you can do a couple of modules and see how your students do, more or less, right? I think this is a comprehensive program, but it can be sort of piecemealed into specific things. If you just want to teach specific things, there are ways that you can modulate it to your needs, right? And so I think, what I hope people take away is that I think we've shown that there is a need for this kind of training. Hope to see more of it in other institutions, but also that there is different versions of this that you can use, and hopefully you can use our data and our resources to create your own.
Yeah, and Amy, for students who are thinking about why should I do this, right? And how can I fit it into my schedule? How do I talk to my advisor about participating in such program? What is your advice?
Be patient with them. This is a unique field in that it is so well established at this point, but it is so new in terms of giving it a formal name. And when I approached my advisor with it, once I explained, exactly what I was interested in, I think, to summarize, the whole thing was such a labor of love and passion. And so much of it is scientists who want to make the world better. And I think a lot of scientists, especially students, are finding that those really esoteric topics don't really resonate with them, and they don't want to spend the rest of their life on that. They want to get out into the real world and they want to solve problems, because they're professional problem solvers. And I think the first step is to recognize how broad your skill set is and how much you can do with it. Science policy really was my avenue into realizing, I have so much energy to attack these things in the world. And science policy was like, you have the skill set. Here you go. We're going to form it into some jargon and formalism that will help you get there. But in any scientist who is interested in making a difference, there are so many ways you can engage with science policy. And I really encourage them to look into it more and get creative about using their PhDs for them rather than letting it guide them.
Yeah, and also perhaps even to add to that, beautiful words that the skill sets are, evolving, and it's not a one-time thing that you do, right? And I think we can just keep talking all day long here, guys, right? In terms of additional, the paper is out, titled "Development and Outcomes of an International Certificate Program in Science Policy and Advocacy for STEM PhD Students and Postdocs." It is widely available in bioRxiv. Adriana Bankston, Amy Ralston, thank you so much for joining me. I feel like we barely skimmed the surface there, but it is enough for now in terms of part one, of course. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Fanuel.
This is great.